2022 saw a big change in the landscape of budget IEMs. One of the most influential IEMs to come out at that time was the 7Hz Salnotes Zero, a single dynamic driver IEM that cost $20 and was very well tuned. It instantly became one of the most recommended IEMs in its price range, and yet, I had some complaints about it that prevented it from being my top recommendation in its category. Of course, I did see why so many liked it, and when it was eventually revealed that Crinacle had a hand in its development, it made sense why it was tuned better than most other IEMs in its price range. Yet, my stance has always been that there were a few issues that made me prefer IEMs like the Tangzu Warner or Truthier Ola over it: the tuning, the cable, and the ear tips. Well, with the release of the Zero 2, I decided to buy a pair myself to see if they've gotten better for me. And right away, we have one major issue when it comes to the packaging. The IEM is called the Zero 2, and yet there's no picture of Zero 2 on the box. This is a pretty big deal when every other IEM has an anime mascot, and other reviewers feel the same way.
There is an issue with this IEM. The issue has to do with the box. There is no cartoon child on the box. Come on, man, where's the cartoon child?
See, even Resolve is on the same page.
Hey now, don't go twisting my words against me.
Okay. His actual complaint was about the ear tips, which we will get into. The Zero 2 does improve upon the original in a few areas, but I do still have some things that I would change about this IEM, so let's get into it. Now, this unit was actually not provided for review. I purchased it myself, and everything I say is my honest opinion based on my experience using it. The first major issue that kept me from enjoying the original Zero was a peak in the treble that was causing it to sound sibilant and too fatiguing for me to enjoy. The overall tuning wasn't bad, and if it wasn't for that specific peak, I could find myself enjoying it as a cheap neutral set of IEMs. But since that area was an issue for me without using EQ to fix it, I wasn't able to properly enjoy it or recommend it quite the same as some of the other IEMs I used. Once Crinacle measured the Zero with his new B&K 4620 ear simulator, or 5128, which is more accurate in upper frequency measurements than the 711 coupler that I and many others use, it did show that there was a substantial peak at around 12 kHz on that rig, and that's one area where the Zero 2 was improved. The new Zero 2 has more of a focus in fixing the treble with data from the 5128, and it sounds a lot smoother without any substantial peaks. Even when testing tracks that typically are mixed a little brighter and that can sometimes have issues with snares or cymbals, the Zero 2 never comes across harsh or fatiguing. That's also in part to the adjustment of the bass and lower mids, which are boosted a bit more than before. Part of the reason for that may also be that this is tuned with the 5128 in mind. With more data to compare to with the 5128, there's a theory that the 711 couplers that we are accustomed to may underrepresent the bass and lower mids when measuring IEMs, and perhaps that more of a bass slope actually gives a closer representation to headphones that measure similarly on the 5128. This is also part of the reason that the IF neutral target for IEMs recently has more of a bass slope. You can read more about this in this article that I will link in the description. Using it throughout the day, I never experienced any harshness to snares or cymbals, even in tracks where those do tend to be a problem for me. The Zero 2 ends up sounding quite pleasant, although I would like a little bit more energy in the upper treble. And if you can get a good seal, then I think they would be the perfect first IEM for anyone who's looking to jump in blind. That is, if you can get a good seal. Remember how I said that the issue that Resolve had with the Zero 2 was with the ear tips? Well, that's also something else that I don't really like about this IEM. They're the exact same tips that were used in the original Zero. They sit quite wide and they tend to push themselves out of your ears. This also made them a bit of a pain to measure in my coupler as they kept getting pushed out of the metal ear canal extension. Even if you are able to get them to hold, sometimes the tips fold in on themselves, breaking the seal and you lose bass. That said, some do really like these tips, so this is more of a person-to-person thing. I ended up opting to use SpinFit CP100 tips, which fixed all my problems, and now they sit in my ear comfortably and securely. Although the tips cost almost half as much as the IEM itself, so it's just something to be aware of. My final complaint about the original Zero was the cable. It was a cheap cable that was stiff and springy, so it never really sat well and it was uncomfortable to use. The new cable is thinner and sits much more comfortably, but I was a little bit disappointed by how they felt on my skin. It's one of those cords where both wires are joined, but then after the Y split they are separated, with a little burr from where the seam was still present. This made them have a little bit of an irritating and scratchy feeling, which I ended up swapping out the cable for my Truthier Ola cable. Overall, I do think that the Zero 2 is an improvement over the original Zero, and I do recommend it to people. The nitpicks that I have about the tips and cable are more of a personal preference thing that some might not mind at all. The most important thing for me was improving the treble response and removing those peaks, and the Zero 2 does this quite well. If you are looking for your first budget IEM, I do recommend this as a safe buy. As well, if you already have a Zero and are curious about the differences with the Zero 2, this is different enough that for $25, it is worth checking out.